In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since. Whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, he told me, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages that you've had.
In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice. Always try to see the best in people, he would say. As a consequence, I'm inclined to reserve all judgments. But even I have a limit.
Welcome to A Niche Retelling Old Sports, the podcast where we explore all the ways old tales are made new. I'm your host, Jasmine Garcia, and joining me today are...
Well, we have to make it appear like one of those nice 1920s parties, you know? My name is Justin Bailey.
Hi-ho, Grady the Smithy here.
Spoilers!
Hi, I'm River.
You simply must know I'm Sam Marchioni.
I'm Callie Castle.
And today, if you couldn't guess from all of the totally vague and totally subtle references, today we're going to be reviewing the very divisive, Baz Luhrmann directed, Leonardo DiCaprio starring 2013 adaptation of The Great Gatsby for our first episode of Gatsby Month. So let's start with what is everybody's relationship with the original story?
I don't have any particular emotional investment in the work in of itself. I believe I read it in high school, not as an assignment, just something that I read. I read it again for this. But I do, however, have a fascination with film. And so I am fond of Baz Luhrmann, and as much as anyone can say that with a straight face. And yeah, so I was willing to rewatch this movie again.
Well, I was taking both AP US History and American Literature in high school when this movie came out. So for AP US History, you could get extra credit if you saw a movie and you did like a little write-up of its historical goofs and such. And this happened to come out after my class had read The Great Gatsby in American Literature, and the movie lost me within the first 5 minutes, and I have never fully forgiven it for that.
I read it as a junior high school project back in ye olden days when we first invented fire. And that was my first introduction to really classical American literature. I had a very poor education. I really enjoyed it. It was one of the first books in high school that I actually enjoyed.
See, I'm an absolute madman in that I am a child. I was in 8th grade when this movie came out. Welcome to Power Word Age, Callie. And so what I did is that I was one of those pedantic nerd children who wanted to read the book first. So I asked my parents to buy me a book copy, like a digital copy of The Great Gatsby. I have it on my iPad. I highlighted, sections of it as I came along. And I could not get through the first 20 pages because I was in the 8th grade. Yeah. And then I saw the movie and I was like, oh, okay. All right, I see what this is putting down. I think my parents went to go see a Bond movie and I was like, I have to see something else while this is happening, so I'll go see Gatsby, a movie I should not have watched, but you know how things are. And so then I went back and tried to read the book, and I'm like, okay, no, things make sense now, because I had, some sort of, visual reference, like, say what you want about Baz, he sure got that visual down pat. And then I bought the soundtrack, and the soundtrack is banger, and it permanently lives on my iPod. It is, I think, the only soundtrack where Jay-Z is a welcome present.
Yeah, the soundtrack, Jazz and I were discussing the soundtrack.
I feel open to can of
Young
words,
and Beautiful will never leave my head, and I hate it. Get it out.
Oh, it gets worse.
Oh, see, Young and Beautiful permanently lives in my head. I totally did not write fans centered around it. I also totally... I respect No Church of the Wild, I think, more than I like it, but I do genuinely like No Church in the Wild. $100 bills gets me someplace in, my hype brain. Like, that little gremlin hype child that wants to be cooler than I am really, really bangs to $100 bills.
I did a summer theater program after this movie came out, and we had to do these really sweat-inducing workouts before we started our scene work, and one of the songs on there was always "A Little Party Never Killed Nobody," and I'm like, I hate this song so much now.
That would do it. Oh, Little Party Never Killed Nobody did just sort of devour pop culture around that time period. I do remember that. I feel really bad for anybody who disliked will.i.am in 2013, because between that and Bang and anything he was doing with the Black Eyed Peas at the time, you could not escape the man. Actually, I think the Peas were broken up by that point and he was doing stupid shit with Britney Spears. I'd have to double check. Don't quote me on that.
Okay, I have no idea how I managed this, but this is one of the books I made it through high school without ever reading, and like a number of
read it for high school.
other ones, which are completely tangential, and I'll leave them for some other conversation some other time, I think that was actually a good thing, because my first exposure to the story was this movie. I have read bits and pieces of the book since then, but not actually read the entire thing. And so it's this, and I've seen the 1970s one with Redford a couple months back. And
will you forgive me if I say a Texas education at work?
I'll forgive it because I went to a high school with 28 kids in the graduating class in Texas. I never read To Kill a Mockingbird.
Not really, because I think it may have been because I switched English classes midway through the one year.
Oh.
There were English classes with it in it. I just somehow managed not to be in one of them.
Speaking about age, or at least, mental pain one can experience when you look at years. So the Robert Redford one came out in 1974. That was 49 years ago. The original book came out in 1925, which is 49 years before that. Mm-hmm. So we are right now as far away from Robert Redford's film as Robert Redford's film was from the original novel.
Oh, god damn it, Justin!
Fun facts of the day.
So it's, 39 years or 29 years before we get another Gatsby remake?
Somewhere around there.
Yeah.
It's in the public domain.
I can't do
It'll come
math.
out
I'm too queer for that.
Well,
it's in the public domain. I expect it any month now.
But yes, as for me, I too read it in my junior year of high school, and listen, I was one of the few nerds that actually enjoyed most of her school reading, so it actually means something when I say that this was probably my favorite book I read in high school.
Jazz, I'm shocked that you enjoyed the books you read. Shocked, I tell you. Shocked.
Stop it.
No.
Okay. I have a fondness. There's just something about this story that hit me even as a teenager. Even though, let's face it, I spoke with Ben Crew earlier this week about how it's kind of hard for a teenager to really get it. And it's really only when you're about the character's ages that you really get it. And I can attest to that as somebody who revisited it in preparation for this. I have seen bits of the Robert Redford version. I was pretty bored, but then again, I was like 16, 17, so maybe I should give it another go in my older, less vulnerable years. And I did just finish Self-Made Boys, which we'll also be covering. Further spoilers, everybody. And I am very fond of that one because it's kind of the everybody lives, fix it fic that I always secretly wanted. Because even at that age, I was like, oh, Nick, you've got it bad, buddy. I'm sorry.
This is sad.
I will say, to open the movie conversation, I remember reading it, and again, I was in 8th grade when I read it, and so I had a glance at what queerness meant, but I could not read queer subtext as heavily. But then I saw this movie, and I was like, there's something going on there. And then when I got older, and somebody said that, yeah, Nick and Gatsby, I was like, queer. And I was on Tumblr, Nick and Gatsby are queer. And I looked at it, and I thought about it for 10 minutes, because I also got Tumblr in 8th grade. And I sat there, and I thought there for a minute, and I'm like, oh, that makes perfect sense. I understand where things are going now. And I can't tell if it's because Tobey and Leo are so comfortable with each other because they have known each other for essentially actors' eons, or if it's just the way that both characters are written or some hellish combination of all of the above. But they are so natural, the two of them, but you're just yes, Nick, buddy, I am so sorry. R.I.P. in pieces.
Okay, no, listen, I didn't understand queer subtext when I was a junior in high school. I grew into it, and now I'm like, oh, buddy, oh, buddy.
I'm not 100% sure that Fitzgerald knew what he was doing with Nick, as opposed to like Hans Christian Andersen absolutely knowing what he was doing when he was writing
Oh,
a
yeah.
mermaid pining after a guy. But as Bex has said, the queer is in the yearning, and it's, do I want to be this person or do I want to bang this person?
And the answer is yes.
I also think there is some level of it, of like, there is like the toxic masculinity of it all. TMCR, where we're gonna probably get into it deeper. First of all, I'd like to shout out to Joel Edgerton playing an absolutely despicable Tom Buchanan. I keep forgetting it's him, and then I pull up IMDb and I'm like, oh wow, it's you. All right.
This is why Luke had to wait till he got old to ask to go to Toshi's station.
Anyway.
I'm the Star Wars person.
But there is a genuine sense, at least also in sections of the movie, and again, it is, something to be said about the fact that, Toby and Leo are, close friends in real life. This movie does seem to lean into and places the idea that, like, Nick might just be Gatsby's only friend he's ever made in his entire life. And because Gatsby has had such an isolated existence and is also coming from the army, where the intricate rituals invented to touch men truly did start in the army, if you believe the rumors. We're not going to get into that. But the idea that, like, Gatsby to some extent is both hyper-toxic masculine and comfortable masculine at the same time. Like, Tom makes the crack about him wearing pink suits or whatever. And so it is this genuine little paradox of, like, is Nick queer for Gatsby in the I want to be him way, or is he queer for Gatsby in the I want to bang him way? But is it also a sense of Nick recognizing humanity in someone who is already other? I was scrolling through the internet, as I do when I can't focus on a movie, and someone pointed out that, like, there is a level of, like, yeah, no, they're queer, buddy. They're queer. Now all of Long Island knows you're gay. I don't know what it is about Nick Carraway that makes him both, like, insufferable, but also incredibly endearing.
I mean, I feel like that's every character except maybe Tom. Like,
no, Daisy's fairly insufferable. I don't think Daisy's endearing, and I can't tell if that's some twisted dark part of my brain that has never grown up, or if it's just some, like, knee-jerk reaction. But, like, I've never liked Daisy.
So Nick is Gatsby's only actual friend, because he's the only one who wants to be friends with Gatsby just to be friends with Gatsby. He's the only one that doesn't expect anything in return and actively will rebuff any attempts by Gatsby to offer him, you want a job, you want this, you want that. Just let me know what you need in order for me to be your friend, and I'll get it. And he's like, no, we cool. And Gatsby doesn't have that from literally any other human being.
Man, do I relate to that concept. Church is toxic.
I would like to follow up on Nick being insufferable, though, because that kind of neatly folds into where the movie lost me. Because, Jazz, I know you put it in the opening, but to reiterate, the opening line of the book, the advice that Nick's father gives, is whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages you've had. And Baz Luhrmann made it always try to see the best in people.
Those are very different things.
So Baz Luhrmann's Nick is this doe-eyed little romantic, whereas
Capital R or
Fitzgerald's Nick is this slightly snobby guy who thinks he's better than everybody else because, I know that not everybody has the advantages I have. That makes me smarter than everyone. It's a Holden Caulfield thing is what it is.
No,
never read it, can't speak to that, but I can speak to being the obnoxious smart person in the room.
Holden's fucking worse. By nature of being a teenage boy.
No, I think they're about the same. They land on the same level of...
The Nick is more readable than Holden ever was.
I would say that they are the same insofar as that they are equally convinced of their own intelligence.
That was just a very popular kind of protagonist in 20th century literature.
Is this a Roast Callie session? Because I feel like this is just becoming a Roast Callie session today.
Listen, you read whatever you wanted to that, Callie.
I'm reading the room loud and clear.
I actually like Nick and Gatsby in this because they're autistic and queer and disasters.
Yes.
Both of them are absolutely being played, whether purposefully or not, as autistic because they have specific ways that they expect to deal with the world. If that doesn't work, their emotions just start going completely haywire.
They get a blue screen of death before the blue screen of death existed.
Ever since you mentioned that in the chat, Grady, I was trying to think of a delicate way of putting this. Basically, I think, at least in Tobey Maguire's case, the fact is he is very good at playing awkward nerds. We know this. Mm-hmm. Most of us first knew him because he was playing Peter frickin' Parker. And while the Venn diagram between awkward nerd and autistic is not necessarily a circle, it is a stack of pancakes.
It's like, when Tom's like, hey, let's go into the city tomorrow, he's like, no, I have my routine. No, we need to go in. No, I have my routine. And as he's being dragged around, but my routine!
Even the end of the film where, like, it's the same in the book and the movie or whatever, just kind of like, hey, you want to go swimming? I haven't used my pool all year. And he's like, I got, like, a fucking job, dude. I got to go to work. And, like, in the book, he stays with him a bit longer, but, like, it's sort of the same thing where, like, he feels this pull to, like, he wants to like Gatsby. He wants to be his friend. And Gatsby sort of, whether he wants to or not, sort of feels this. He trusts Nick more than he does any other character in either of the narratives because he's the only one who he, like, tells anything to. Like, he tells a version of his life to Jordan. But with everyone else, they have, like, the rumors, but to Nick, like, he's allowing him to know what he feels about Daisy. He's, like, when they're having, like, their date or whatever, he's coming over, just kind of like, I don't know what to do. Like, like, I'm embarrassed. Like, am I doing it wrong? Am I doing it wrong? Am I messing it up? He's like, dude, calm down.
That's my other weird hang-up. First of all, shout out to Baz Luhrmann for keeping Gatsby visually out until he appears in the now gifable champagne raisin.
Chef's kiss.
That was a very good entrance.
That's a good reveal. But, there is something in DiCaprio's performance that I can't tell if it's the cultural knowledge of what we know about DiCaprio now coming back to bite me on his past performances, or if there was always something there that just rubbed me off. DiCaprio is both too charismatic and not charismatic enough to pull this role off. He's trying to be the stumbling, bumbling idiot before the date with Daisy, like the stilted, like, I get, but, like, when he comes back in after being sopping wet, I don't buy it, because I'm like, you're fucking Leonardo DiCaprio. Everyone and their mother has had a crush on you since you were 16. But there's also the reveal when Nick talks about his smile. I'm looking at it and I'm like, that ain't it, Buster. That ain't fucking it. And I don't know if it's a me thing. I don't know if it's a cultural sort of, like, we now know shit about DiCaprio that we didn't know when this movie came out, or at least I fucking didn't because I was 13, or if it was like just a disconnect. But there's something in it that doesn't grate me. Like, it's never distract, but it's just off enough to color it.
In the most recent rewatch, the thing that I noticed is, I couldn't take the relationship between him and Daisy seriously because Carey Mulligan at the time was 28, and that's way above 25, and, like, there's no way that DiCaprio would.
To answer your question, River, you are not the only one. There's this website I absolutely love. It's called Frock Flicks. They cover historical costuming in movies. They hate this version because the costumes are terrible at representing the 1920s, and I have to agree with them there. I can't believe this won the Best Costume Oscar. Like, blah.
Period piece it was destined to.
They're pretty,
there
though.
There were other period pieces nominated that year, but the point is, they are also put off by Leonardo DiCaprio enough that instead of Man Candy Monday, they made him the subject of a Man Ick Monday.
Ooh.
Because he does have a certain air to him. I think what it is that it's that thing where, like, you know that he's acting. There are some actors where it's chameleonic and they're effortless in their performances. Your Stanley Tucci's, your Meryl Meryl Streep's. Then there are the actors where, like, you know they are acting, and that creates a disconnect.
It's not as egregious as my best example of this is Dunkirk, which is not a movie. It's a 2.5 hour panic attack. Thanks, Hans Zimmer. Fuck you.
Fuck
I
you,
don't-
Dunkirk.
Fuck Dunkirk. Fuck that metronome score. I thought I was overreacting the first time I had to sit through it for class, and then a guest professor played a scene of it, and I was like, yeah, the last time I watched this movie, I nearly had a panic attack, so forgive me in advance if I have to step out. And he's like, totally fair. I managed to get through the scene, but the minute it was done, I was like out the fucking door, because I'm like, oh god, I hated that. But that's not the point. Point is that movie is very bad at being like, this is a character. I'm like, no, that's Harry Styles in a silly jacket. Or no, that's Sir Kenneth Branagh in a silly mustache. Or no, that's Tom Hardy having to cover his face again because for some reason Chris Nolan keeps casting him in things but refusing to admit he's a whore. You know, it's never that egregious.
Speaking of Kenneth Branagh with a silly mustache, when are we doing Love Lovers Lost?
We have to focus.
At some
we have
point.
to focus.
At some point.
I'm never at the point where I'm going, that's not Gatsby, that's Leonardo DiCaprio in a silly suit. Which is a good thing.
It's
But
the bare minimum required for acting.
Yeah,
I
but
didn't
like
see it as just Leonardo DiCaprio in a suit. I saw it as Gatsby being someone who is extremely uncomfortable in his own skin and is making an effort to only let people get half an inch deep so that they can't get through the facade.
I have to agree. I'm kind of with you on this, Grady. I actually thought that because he's clearly making such an effort, that's exactly why it kind of works. Like, at least for me, it works.
Yeah, for me, it came
Regardless
across
of
as...
my thoughts of Leonardo DiCaprio, the man. Sorry.
I think it worked really well for me. The funniest scene for me was when Toby was in the apartment in New York with Tom and all them, and even the poor dogs looking at him like, I know you don't want to be here, bud. I don't want to be here either. But neither of us want to be here. It's okay.
I mean, that's as good a point as... I'm sorry, but the female performances, the direction Luhrmann's giving them, they're awful.
Go.
Myrtle's awful, Catherine's awful, Jordan should basically just be considered an exposition dumper for all the nuance her character's given.
She's
Fucking
kind of
wasted
that in the
Elizabeth
book,
Debicki.
too.
How about that?
But at least Jordan has some layers in the book. Like, there's that stuff about her being a cheater.
Well, everyone else in this movie is a cheating. What else is fucking new? It's the 20s.
Yeah, but cheating at golf as opposed to cheating on a partner.
Is there a difference? Golf is her partner. It's lavender. It's a lavender sports relationship.
But, like, I was reading on IMDb because that is what you do instead of things. And, like, even Carey Mulligan admits that she's like, I'm not happy with my performance in this film. I think I got freaked out by how big it was. And I think that, like, my performance suffered for it. And I think you do get, like, sections of that. Like, you can clearly tell that Mulligan is an understated actress. And I've seen her in other things. She's fantastic in Inside Llewyn Davis. But that's because it is not hard to be fantastic in Llewyn Davis. But there are definitely moments where you can tell she is a little off-kilter. And I don't fault her for it. I think that in some scenes where she is incredibly off-kilter, it works for who Daisy is as a person. But there are other moments where I'm like, okay, yeah, this is a lot. But also, does Baz have a great record with his women?
I mean, whether or not the women are written well, at the very least, like, after watching this, I fell back into watching Moulin Rouge, and say what you want about Moulin Rouge, but Nicole Kidman as Satine gets to run the full gamut. She gets to flex, and no woman gets to flex. Nobody really gets to flex in this movie other than Leonardo DiCaprio.
Incorrect.
Even, like, no, hear me out. Even Toby and Joel, they're allowed to flex, but they're not allowed to flex to the range that DiCaprio is. This was absolutely a DiCaprio vehicle.
Yeah, that I will grant you. This was definitely meant to highlight him, which, in fairness, he is the title character, but it is a shame that other people's performances didn't get as much as maybe they could have, especially in as bombastic a movie as this, because
I felt Carey Mulligan's performance was really actually quite incredible because you could just see the deadness in her eyes. Like, I have lost my soul, I've lost my will, there is no point, just end my misery, end my suffering, I'm done. I've left my body, soul, and mind all at that is here is my skeleton and my muscle and flesh.
Yeah, I really liked her performance because the way that Daisy Buchanan came across to me, since this was the first time that I went in, perhaps that was more of a thing than it would have been if I was familiar with other takes on it, was that she was a woman who was not happy, but was willing to settle for an unhappiness that she could at least find some security in. That she wanted
the beautiful fool
the
concept.
Convenience of having what from the outside might look like a great marriage, and from the inside, obviously rotten to the core. She could not bring herself to break from that because it was an unhappiness that she knew how to function within.
Well, and it's so interesting because this is kind of an obscure history fact. The Ponzi scheme was not originally created by Ponzi. There was a woman who had done the same thing with women who were unsecure with their finances. They didn't have a father or a husband to secure their finances with. She created a bank and did the same thing with them. She was the original creator of that, and Daisy could have easily fallen into that trap had she not been with Tom, or had she not had somebody taking care of her finances. Being with Tom was more secure than that risk.
It's the beautiful fool concept,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Let my daughter be nothing more than a beautiful, for that's the best thing a girl could be, or whatever the exact lineage is. But that's the general.
Because if her daughter's too
Where it's
intelligent, she'll realize how little opportunity she has.
John Green in one of the Crash Course episodes about
Crash
Great Gatsby,
Course.
yes, put it so perfectly.
Here's the thing, you're not supposed to like Daisy Buchanan, at least not in the uncomplicated way that you like, say, cupcakes.
The reason I have always found Daisy fascinating is because I can see somewhere underneath all of the shallow trappings she has put herself in, I can see a woman who could do so much more.
You see that in the shirt scene when Gatsby's flinging all the shirts at Daisy, and she's having fun, and she's laughing and giggling, and she looks like she's alive again as he's flinging all these scarves and shirts at her. And then all of a sudden it hits her, wait, I can't enjoy this. I have to go back to Tom. I'm sad again.
But the only thing she can say is it's so beautiful.
Actually, because interestingly enough, that was one of the things that was added to the film, from what I could tell in my reread of Gatsby. Like,
the scene is expanded. It is in both. It is like a few other scenes in the film.
Well, no, the shirt thing, yeah. But Nick realizing that no, that's not actually what's upsetting Daisy. Because let's face it, book Nick is not nearly so insightful.
No.
It could be just because it's a film. They don't want to leave things as read.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of times where just like there's the subtext of what's happening, and then Nick will say, "This is the subtext of what the scene is happening."
Yep.
The shirt scene was hey, let's really play with the 3D format, if I recall correctly.
Baz Luhrmann is allergic to subtext.
I think it's more of a case of, like, because Nick is our POV character. Like, there's a lot of things about that fucking whole ass scene that are a lot of, we are only here because Nick is our POV character.
So we have to be in his head. We have to make it that you're in his head, and there's not a whole lot of great ways to do that. So we're just going to have him talk to a psychiatrist, and that's how you're hearing the story. And we're going to have him talk over it. That's how you're going to get in his head. Sorry, it's the best way we've got. Good luck. Have fun with it.
I don't fault it. First of all, this is a weird book to adapt because it's not incredibly long. It's like 100-ish pages, maybe, if I remember rightly.
The audiobook is like 5 hours long.
I've only read it, but it's not like a super expansive book. You cannot use this book as a weapon in close quarters combat. Which is my barometric for how thick books are. So there is, I think, a level of like, crap, how are we gonna boost this to fit a pseudo feature length TMCR?
Because the audiobooks is 4-ish hour, but it's 4 hours of basically a bunch of scattered conversations Nick is having. There's no real things that are happening beyond I am at this location, I am talking with this people, this person leaves, another person enters, and the conversation continues. Okay, next day.
Yeah, that's literally what I was noticing as I was listening to it today. I was like, wait a second. I would like more character development, please. I would like some other people in my book.
Yeah, like the movie's got to do a lot of streamlining and a lot of addition to.
Which is an awkward line to straddle because you can't flesh out too much, but you also have to streamline. And you're like, well, where do we streamline? Where do we flesh out? And sometimes bad decisions get made in trying to balance that line because it's not an easy tightrope to walk.
There's at least one bad decision in this that had nothing to do with choosing what to slim down, and that's that Baz Luhrmann is too romantic for his own good, or at least he thinks he's too romantic. Because the shirt scene, it's emblematic of something that I think he wasn't intending. Yes, Daisy looks happy and she has fun, but if you think about Daisy as the embodiment of the American dream and all that it promises, it's gonna ditch you the second you stop offering it the fun that it wants. And they put so much effort into making us think, oh, look, Daisy and Gatsby are having fun. They're totally in love. Lana Del Rey is boring into your brain. Isn't this romantic? No, it's not romantic. One of the defining posts of my Tumblr life. If you think The Great Gatsby is romantic, if you think Romeo and Juliet is romantic, you didn't fucking understand the story.
But that's what I was saying, I think, was like, you can see that she's having a brief moment of subtle happiness, and then it kind of reality crashes back down on her as soon as it stops, and she's like, oh, my soul has departed my body again. Goodbye, world.
It's still like the movie is still framing it as a genuine love that has been torn apart by circumstance, as opposed to two people only seeing an illusion of what the other is.
Can't repeat the past? Of course you can.
Sam, for me, that scene was what made me realize that these two only were able to connect on a superficial layer wrapped in 5 years of nostalgia, that they couldn't make it work because he was too wrapped up in the young debutante that he refused to accept she wasn't anymore. And she was going to go with the choice that would be easy over the choice that might be hard and cause her even more pain every time. And I love the Lana Del Rey song because it's all about how it's not going to last for me.
That is true. The lyrics are pretty clear about that. It's just like, right now we're pretty happy because, we're gorgeous and rich, but that's not going to be something that's going to happen forever, no matter how much we like to pretend it is.
In about 30 seconds, we're all going to be miserable because the shirts have stopped flying and now we got a mess to clean up.
Yep.
Like, it's a metaphorical and literal representation of their lives. I mean, the shirts are flying, the party is going, the excitement is happening, but once everything settles down, it's like, oh, what do we have left here? We've got a mess, and I mean, it's got to be cleaned up. You're going to have to fold these shirts again, and it's really a representation of, living in the moment, but then you have to deal with the consequences of that moment later down the line.
I just don't give Baz Luhrmann that level of credit. I mean, like I said, I went back to Moulin Rouge after this, and he's just so attached to the spectacle and the splendor. I don't think he came away from this with the idea that the American dream is a fucking lie that will kick you just to spite you. He came away with it as that the American dream is beautiful, but people are mean, and so we can't have nice things.
I was going to change the subject into Moulin Rouge again.
I mean, we definitely do need to address the fact that, as Justin and I both were and Callie and I were both kind of discussing, this is very much The Great Gatsby through the lens of Moulin Rouge, for better or worse. I have seen many parallel gift sets.
And you're like, oh, hey, somebody has a style they like to repeat a lot.
He's got an aesthetic. What can you tell? What can you do?
You can repeat history.
We just did it!
He's going to do it until he gets a Best Picture Oscar, damn it!
He needs that best original song!
Like, a lot of the changes or like a lot of the reinterpretations of it, it's like, well, the Daisy and Gatsby relationship is romantic if you look at it in the same way that Christian's and Satine's relationship is romantic. It's these two people who aren't supposed to be together, but they do have this genuine connection, right? And it even ends with the antagonist figure realizing that he's being messed with for the entire film and saying, well, I don't like that. I don't want it to be like this. This rotation is over. This is how it's going to be. I'm going to ruin you, Gatsby, or I'm going to end this and I'm going to fix this problem. And even within the structure, like Moulin Rouge is several narratives kind of nested within each other, but it's all held together with this wraparound narrative of Christian at the end, after everything is said and done, sort of like going through his memories, just like how the fraying device in this is Nick Carraway making the novel that is this film, right? There's a lot of structural, there's a lot of like reinterpretation of the text that makes it similar to Moulin Rouge more than it isn't.
And I think it even goes beyond just the fact that Baz Luhrmann has a style. No, he was clearly trying to emulate Moulin Rouge, especially because otherwise we would definitely see more references to his other films. I mean, come on, you have Leonardo DiCaprio dying again, and yet I still thought more Moulin Rouge in general than, say, Romeo and Juliet.
He fell over bleeding. Enough said.
If he'd done something like, I don't know, have Gatsby and Daisy like looking at each other through warped glass or something before they kissed, that could have been a really good Romeo and Juliet callback. Because that could have been like the symbolism of distortion.
Oh, that would have been neat. I'm actually really mad that wasn't a thing now. But no, like...
Oh, that should have been there.
Like, even Nick's introduction in the flashback, like, it is almost the exact same scene as Christian's introduction in the flashback, for one thing.
Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to get started.
Although we don't know how much Christian was paying for his flat, and we know exactly how much Nick was paying. Nick was paying $80 a month for a full cottage on Long Island, a full house. I looked it up. In today's money, that would be less than $1,500. It would be $1,448.22 in 2023.
Capitalism will crush us.
Full house.
Capitalism will crush us all, and we will all perish under the boot.
That's the point
in
of
the
the
fucking
story.
roaring 20s again.
That is part of the point of the story, ain't it?
The other stylistic connection between the two is obviously Moulin Rouge is held together by having songs that are emblematic or direct references to or direct adaptations of modern pop music. And in a similar way, this film has music which is written by and in the style of modern pop or hip-hop.
And when it is, it's jazzy covers of other pop songs. My favorite thing is that Crazy in Love is on this soundtrack and Beyonce is on this soundtrack. Neither of them are done by Beyonce because Beyonce's covering Back to Black by Amy Winehouse and Crazy in Love is being covered by Amélie Sandé.
At least the music from Moulin Rouge hasn't aged as poorly and uncomfortably. I mentioned this to Jess. She missed this lyric. There is a lyric from Ye, or as Kanye, whatever you want to call it doesn't matter, that says, "This is our Holocaust, our people are dying."
Is that in No Church of the Wild?
I don't know what song it was, but it's in the movie.
Is it during... It's during the Green Fairy ass drunk party scene, yes?
Yeah.
That might be in $100 bills then.
It was still uncomfortable, and I wanted to crawl in a hole and just bury myself in it.
You get the feeling that if there were a director other than Luhrmann making this, like maybe, I don't know, an Ava DuVernay, or... part of me would really like to see a black director take on this material, because I was very much noticing the way that Luhrmann was utilizing black people in this thing, and it was mostly as window dressing. And on one hand, yes, I get it, this is the 20s, segregation is still very much a thing, black people are still very much second-class citizens, and Tom is a goddamn racist. It feels like if you wanted to push up the realities of how shitty the American dream is, I think there was a huge missed opportunity in recognizing how much race is part of class. And with a different director, I would really like to see maybe a version of Gatsby where part of the issue is that he is a black person who can pass and tries to pass as white.
I mean, there are so many theories about that sort of thing, that he's a light-skinned black man, or at least you could read him as such, or that he's Jewish himself and is just hiding it. There's so many ways you could absolutely emphasize how othered Gatsby is, and in spite of the fact he has found success.
And as someone who kind of grew up in that poverty that they kind of mentioned, as someone who grew up in that East Texas poverty, I wasn't as impoverished as my neighbors were, but my neighbors had to go hunting for their own food, and they had to miss class to go hunt for food, and they would chew tobacco in class, and like, it's a whole different world that you come from. And if you put those people in Hollywood, they wouldn't know what they were doing, and it would be blatantly obvious from every mannerism that they have that they just don't belong, no matter how hard they might try to act like they fit in. You would be able to tell that they're from deep East Texas.
As I'm thinking about this, it seems like a terrible idea, and yet in the right hands, I think it could be incredibly intense, as if the Wilsons were black. Because there absolutely are white racists romantically involved or fetishize black women. And I could absolutely see Tom taking a black man's loss, a loss that Tom essentially inflicted on him, and using that to give himself an easy patsy. Like, oh no, impoverished man who I think is inferior to me. This other man whom I think is inferior to me is definitely the person who killed your wife, so it wouldn't be a terrible thing if you took revenge on that person.
What an awful shame that would be if you were to definitely not do the thing we do not want you to do. That would be bad and wrong.
It would have to be handled very deftly, you're right.
Yeah.
If it was adapted like that, it would just be him utilizing the things he's been reading about in that dang old The Rise of the Colored Empire by Goddard.
I read that in the audiobook and I was like, I don't remember this from 12 years ago.
What's worse is that passage has aged backwards since high school, if you ask me.
Well, the funny thing is that particular book doesn't exist. However, it was one of those, like, let's just move some letters around and make it a different thing, because the real book is The Rising Tide of Color Against the White World Supremacy by Lorthorpe Stoddard.
Oh my God, it's somehow worse.
That was a book published in 1920, and that was just straight up a Ku Klux Klan member. Earlier was, so they added a scene when he was at the party, and this is sort of a twofold one, so I get sort of why they would do it, but in the book, Nick is expressly not an alcoholic. He says he gets drunk twice, and they say the same thing in this book, and then he continues drinking, but in the book, he maintains not being an alcoholic, but in this, I guess to do the sort of alcoholic author thing, like maybe instead of Fitzgerald, they thought he was Hemingway, who knows?
They might have also been trying to pull like an unreliable narrator card.
No, so in the movie, so it's, I only found this out in the IMDb. All of the hospital stuff is several years later.
Exactly.
So it's, I think what it is in the movie, he drinks when it's social. Nick is very much a social drinker.
And then he loses his boyfriend.
And we're not going to worry about him being, drugged in that opening scene, because he was definitely roofied, y'all.
Oh, yeah.
In the whole, framing device, TMCR, it is definitely, it's grief alcoholism. It's grief shorthand.
And it's just sad.
We cannot directly call our character queer, so we can't say he's grieving the boyfriend, but it's grief, y'all.
Well, the thing is, Luhrmann could have called him gay, but he's a coward!
Exactly.
Coward.
Which is wild, because I'm sorry, I'd be shocked if Baz didn't ship it with the way he filmed this. Like, why pick Moulin Rouge to parallel if you're not just gonna out and out say, yeah, Nick is unrequitedly in love with him?
Here's my incredibly dumb question. Is Baz Luhrmann gay or is he straight?
He's married to a woman. He is married to Catherine Martin. They have been for some time. I swear to God, half the reason he makes movies is just to get her Oscars.
Okay, because, I feel like he's one of those directors that, to some extent has a respectable, camp aspect about him.
Oh, yeah.
And so, he always comes up in, camp circle conversation. And I can never remember if he's actually, if it's one of those things that we, the queers, have claimed
The scene where he first gets drunk as well, they don't do it a lot, but they do, beyond just sort of altering or changing some of the exact verbiage, they also add stuff. I didn't particularly dislike the stuff he was sort of pontificating about in that room where he was like looking out, and like the thing they kept going back to was like this, he was at the same time present but also trying to observe himself. That was sort of a thing that it was subtext in the book, but in this one they make it explicit, right?
There was a scene they cut from the book that I noticed where Myrtle's on the train and she's like, I want the puppy! Buy me the puppy! And like, this dude's got like a basket of puppies hanging around his neck, and he's like, oh yeah, this one's $10.
And Grady, like, maybe you could explain, because it's with the 70s one, did they also adapt out his father? It's really weird to me that this, like, in this movie they expressly say, I was the only one who attended his funeral. I'm like, fuck you, you didn't. Where's his dad? Fuck you.
In the 70s movie, the father arrives at some point after the funeral has been held, and that's how Nick finds out the story of Gatsby's actual childhood.
Okay.
And it's interesting. That was like one of the big things I had forgotten since the last time I had read it. And upon reading this, I was really touched because, yeah, he's not crazy about the fact that his son ran away, but he is really proud of him for climbing his way out of the poverty that
and that's not easy to do. Never has been, never will be.
Mr. Gats had my heart there. It just really added to the humanity of Gatsby. Like, regardless of what you think of the fact that he is essentially trying to mold the girl he is obsessed with into helping him achieve his dream, whether he realizes it or not, there is such a humanity to him because you can see why that has happened, because he's thinking, I have had nothing for most of my life. I have worked so hard. Shouldn't I have something that I really want? Because this does not matter to me. I did this for her. And he doesn't realize that she has her own agenda, and he is wearing rose-colored glasses about it.
The one thing that kept hitting home to me that Gatsby was completely delusional is we can just go back to like it was 5 years ago. I'm like, she has had a child.
She has.
That physically changes you. Like, even if she doesn't really give that much of a shit about her daughter beyond hoping she'll be a beautiful little fool, because we don't see the kid until she and Tom are booking it. But
she still cares about the kid in some vague form or fashion. Most parents generally tend to at least vaguely pretend to give a shit.
I genuinely do not know what Gatsby thought was going to happen to the kid when he got Daisy.
Like,
the kid would go off to an orphanage, and that's where we get Annie.
Now that's a backstory I didn't think about.
It's a Gatsby life for us. It's a Gatsby life for us.
Her parents abandoned her. I'm just saying.
What's the unhinged theory that doesn't quite work? Where it's like, oh, Jack survived the Titanic and is actually secretly Gatsby now.
I've heard of that one.
I believe more that the Aviator takes place in the same universe.
I will say, I found this post and I feel the need to share it with you all because I feel like this would relate to sections of the current company. And it's, sometimes I wonder how much fanfic of classical/iconic literature exists because of school projects just floating out there in a drive some. Not to mention that nothing is more unhinged than bored middle/high schoolers being forced to liven up books they may not care about. For every deranged AO3 crossover fic, there is an infinitely more deranged crack fic written for the Great Gatsby or Antigone or To Kill a Mockingbird or whatever by a bored high schooler and his friends for 10th grade English.
I got away with submitting fanfic for assignments.
I did that too. I won't discuss what it was, but I wrote some fan fiction for a creative writing class and just changed all the names so that they wouldn't know.
Oh, I also did that for a creative writing class, except I didn't file off the serial numbers. I filed them off enough, and then I left the room when they were doing critique, and when I came back in, my friend looked at me dead in the eye, and he's like, this is supernatural fanfiction, isn't it? I'm like, yeah, it is! But no, the reason I brought this post up is because I do actually have unhinged middle school fanfic that I wrote. Unhinged high school fanfic that I wrote. My senior year of high school, my English teacher, as an end of year, like, the AP exams are over, you don't have a state exam in this class project, was to do something involving, like, bringing a bunch of what classical literature characters that you had read throughout your 4 years of high school would you bring to a party. And I decided that my party's theme was queer to queer-coded side characters. So I invited Patrick Nobody from The Perks of Being a Wallflower, Mercutio, Horatio,
Good.
and Nick Carraway to a dinner party. But I did genuinely go looking to see if I still had the script. I don't think I do, but if I do, I will send it in the server. But I did write a
I'm
script.
looking forward to this.
I script about the dinner party. We had to do it as if like we were hosting. Nick Carraway, Patrick Nobody, Mercutio, and Horatio would have.
That is delightful, and I am giggling.
Okay, but now I'm thinking about it. Would this movie have been better if there had been a Harold Perrineau in it? Harold Perrineau. He played Mercutio in Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet.
Ah, okay.
He is phenomenal. Phenomenal actor.
Well, on the subject of fan fiction, I mean, you can stretch it out to any given thing. I mean, you can even add the Muppets to it.
Again, spoilers!
What?
Stop spoiling things!
I have no idea what you're talking about. I thought you said this was spoiler free.
Muppets.
Anyway.
Dun, 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 dun. I got the theme song wrong, but whatever.
We sure
Honestly, I think this movie would have been better if Luhrmann had brought back his more frequent collaborators. Like, you could have found room for a John Leguizamo in here somewhere.
Yeah.
Ooh, that would have been awesome.
Who would you cast him as?
Gatsby.
Bruno.
Honestly, I'm trying to think now. Part of me really wants to see John's take on Nick. Like,
that would be awesome.
Tobey Maguire, but John Leguizamo could play a really interesting Nick Carraway.
I would love that. Like,
so I think that if anything we're getting from this is that to some extent this movie tried to be Baz Luhrmann trying to take himself too seriously while also still being Baz Luhrmann. And it could have.
That's a good way to put it.
It could have been improved by Baz Luhrmann leaning into the fact that he is Baz Luhrmann.
He forgot who he was.
Yeah, like nobody wanted Baz Luhrmann's pseudo-serious take on The Great Gatsby. He should have at least leaned into the camp a little more.
The campiest thing about this movie to me is the special effects. Like,
yeah.
Those flashback sequences, those montages, they are so cheeseball.
The text over the screen still confuses me.
He was Moulin
Because
Rouging
it's out of the book.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, but like, it just felt unnecessary. We know it's based on a book. I don't need you to beat me over the head with the book you're basing it off of.
They have to keep reminding you that Nick Carraway is writing the book that we're currently seeing. You know, that's why they keep having to show every scene of him writing every fucking page, right?
Yes, exactly.
And I will defend a lot of things with Baz Luhrmann. Like, I personally really like his reasoning for why he chooses contemporary music when he does things that are anachronistic. But for me, he needed a different editor. He needed someone who either like literally the editor who did Moulin Rouge, because the person here, I feel like whoever edited this, I think someone described to them in words what Moulin Rouge was like, and he didn't get it, because there are some scenes in this, and the most egregious one.
There were 3 editors on this movie.
The most egregious one is the one with Wolfsheim. People joke about that scene in like whatever Taken film where like there's like 70 cuts to show like Liam Neeson getting over like a fence, but like there's a shot where Nick Carraway is sitting down in a chair and it shatters the 180 rule. It's like they have like 9 cuts to like show him getting into a fucking chair, and it's like, it's oh my god, I have no idea where I am in space. What is happening? Who are you? Who is anyone? Who am I? Because they're trying to capture like the frenetic, like, you know, just kind of like, here's everything. We shot this like 50 times, show all of it. That scene in particular, like, is like, because they're also trying to establish like Wolfsgram, like, you know, they show you like every angle of his face, and like they like really, they do that tight close up on his molars, like the molar buttons, and it just like, oh my god, stop, calm down, Christ. And like they calm down near the end of the movie, but like for like the first hour I'm watching this, I'm like, oh my god,
the teeth were a bit much.
The teeth
It's
were
in
in
the
the book,
book.
hon.
They could still be a bit much for both.
So I went on the Wikipedia page to, like, figure out the editor situation, and now I'm looking at the casting situation. Do you guys want to hear who else was considered for Daisy?
Yes, immediately.
Amanda Seyfried.
No.
No.
Keira Knightley.
Oh.
Jessica Alba.
No.
Meh.
Rebecca Hall.
Don't
Who?
know who that is.
She directed Passing, played that one scientist lady in Iron Man 3. She's been in a couple of things.
Okay, I'm not done yet.
You'll know her face.
Blake Lively.
Ooh.
Abby Cornish. Michelle Williams.
Probably.
That does not surprise me, considering she and Carey Mulligan really do kind of fit a very similar
Yeah,
niche.
I get her and Carey Mulligan
not-
confused a lot.
There's still
Not done.
more?
Scarlett Johansson.
No.
No.
And apparently, those were all actresses he auditioned, and apparently he considered Natalie Portman. He did not cast her, which to me is freaking funny, because I don't know if you guys know this story, but Natalie Portman was Baz Luhrmann's first choice to be Juliet in Romeo and Juliet.
Huh.
And then he put her and Leonardo DiCaprio next to each other, and Leo was 21, and Natalie was 13, and they were like, no, this looks creepy. So Natalie had to go, and Claire Danes came in.
That's awkward, uncomfortable, funny, and a little too realistic all at the same time.
I think that's the only
And see,
time.
this is why I think Baz Luhrmann is too romantic for his own good. Because if he'd kept with that casting, then he might have realized that Romeo and Juliet is not romantic.
Stop using logic. This is a logic-free podcast.
I think for the sake of, like, what he was trying to do with Romeo and Juliet, which is, you know, if you want to use the tragedy of youth as youth sees it, they do kind of have to be in similar age.
Hi, Kyle, if you're listening.
Hi, Kyle.
Hi, Kyle.
Again, there are certain aspects that just live in my brain, and that is one of those lines that lives in my brain. This is what getting a film degree gets me. So that's why, like, I don't think that, like, would work, and I'm glad that someone said no. I think more directors need someone in their life who says no.
They need someone to boop them on the head with a stick and go, no, bad decision, no.
I don't
Sit in the corner until you figured out what you did wrong.
I don't think it's anything that serious. I just think that, like, more directors need no men in their life.
Steven Spielberg is the exception. Steven Spielberg.
No, there are times when Steven Spielberg needs to be told no.
If Steven Spielberg had been told no, we would not have Willie Scott.
Who?
The bad female love interest from Indiana Jones 3. In general, more directors need people who will say no to them. And even when you think that, like, a director is above being said no to, no, that is exactly when they need to be told no the most.
You're not wrong. I hate to say it, but you're not wrong.
With that said, I do think we've been kind of poking fun at Baz Luhrmann's style a lot. For me, it worked with this movie just because...
It's the 20s. It's decadence. It's glamour. It's ritz. It's supposed to be over the top.
Now, the question really does remain, does it still do a good enough job to show that, you're right, there ain't no party like a Gatsby party, because a Gatsby party don't stop until we're all generally disillusioned with the jazz age. It kind of showed that.
To a degree, I think it, like, tries and kind of, like, stumbles towards that direction drunkenly, but it doesn't quite make it there.
It crashes it as it's leaving the driveway.
I think it leaves you exhausted, but it's more like, oh god, I just had a shitty party and I'm hungover and I'm drained from the Baz Luhrmann of it all.
It's the Katy Perry's last Friday night moment.
Katy Perry didn't just have one party, she had every party.
I mean, Gatsby did too. That makes sense.
My metaphor just works even better now.
Yes.
This movie is a frantic, hyperkinetic mess, and I love it.
Yeah.
Because every single criticism against it, I get it. But it's also kind of part of why I love it. I don't know, maybe it's because Moulin Rouge is so ingrained in my DNA.
It was one of the first things we did when I saw you here.
It is indeed. We went to see it at Alamo. That was fun.
And there were little party favors.
There was a rubber frog that I still have. But anyway.
I guess since we're doing like pseudo ratings or whatever the equivalent is for this, in terms of an adaptation, I dislike many of the liberties in terms of like the way they've changed Nick Carraway's closing lines, and we'll hear some of it later. I don't know who told them, but they did a decent job. Either way, but I dislike some of the choices for in terms of an adaptation. As a film, in and of itself, it's fine. It's matinee, whatever. But in terms of an adaptation of the book, that is an adaptation of, I don't think it succeeds in conveying the thing that the book was intended to be about. Or
like it's just too caught up in the glamour to really
it's too caught up in the story, essentially. Like it's trying to say the story, and like as Sam repeats, it's interested in the romance plot within Gatsby, but Gatsby isn't necessarily about the romance that is its plot. It's about how these people are going to ruin everything for the next century. So
yeah,
and in ways we are still crawling our way out of.
Yeah.
Out of? We keep on getting dragged back in.
I started to say, like, what hole have we dragged ourselves out of yet? I'd like to be out of that hole.
Me too.
You have to hope for progress.
Oh, of course.
Well, yeah, obviously.
But
Throwing this back briefly to Kyle, again, it's like, this is a movie where a high school student can watch it to get a basic idea of the plot to write their essay, but then they're going to need to go check the book to make sure they're writing the quotation correctly.
Spark
and to get the page number.
You're not wrong at all. Like, the fact that this was a couple of people's here's first iteration of it, I definitely see how that is a good one to start off with, because it definitely holds your attention, and it is an exciting and fun movie to watch. And I'll admit, that last scene where he's walking on the dock and sees this image or ghost of Gatsby, it gets me every time.
It's a good image.
And speaking of, there's one particular change in this adaptation that people do seem to object to the most, and that is when Gatsby loses his temper in the midst of the confrontation.
I had no problem with that. It felt very natural. Like, I would be over it too. I'd just be like, say that to my face.
I disagree with the interpretation of it looked like he had killed a man, because in the book, it's more of like he's dumbstruck. He's like gaunt. He is just like, he almost doesn't know where he is. In the movie, yeah, he looks like he killed a man because he looks like he just like caved Tom's skull in with a fucking with a
Tom
brick.
finally gotten Gatsby to sink to his level.
Yeah,
but it's also like the horror then comes from him having like a mask off moment for Daisy, and that it frames it so that the violence is supposedly what makes him lose Daisy, as opposed to the fact that Daisy is a selfish creature who will choose the easy path over what she actually wants.
Well,
I think it's still a contributing factor.
In all fairness to Daisy here, the reason she hates Tom is because Tom is a brute. And the reason she loves Gatsby is she sees the surface level. And this is the moment where Matt cracks, and she sees that he can be just as much of a brute as the man she hates, but is married to.
Well, yes, but then that's losing Fitzgerald's original framing of the scene, where you don't even need the physical demonstration of violence, just the revelation that he's a criminal and a bootlegger is enough to shatter that impression Daisy has of him and bring him down to Tom's level, because even if she hasn't seen him as a brute, she now associates him with brutish things in a completely different way. Tom might be a brute, but he has the respectability of old money in a way that Gatsby doesn't.
I also disagree with the change. So, like, they still have the scene where Gatsby is encouraging Nick to, like, basically buy in. Like, he, just kind of like, oh, you don't have to work with Wolfsheim, just whatever. But, like, I want to help you out. And Nick says no, because he's doing it, like what Grady said before, he's doing it because he likes Gatsby. But in this movie, the way they frame it and the way that Tom implies it, he's basically insinuating that he was going to use that as the gateway to bring Nick into the fold, basically, right? Instead of it's like, this is like a gift, this is like, oh, he wanted you to become a criminal like him. And I can almost see that as like the thing in the book itself, but it's weird that they would make it that explicit when in the book again, it could be either way. Like, did he invite him into offer him this money, offer him this job opportunity because he wanted to essentially rip him off, or was he doing it because he genuinely wanted to benefit a person who was going to be the key to him seeing Daisy again, right?
Well, I mean, that's the question, isn't it?
But,
And I think we'll never know the answer to that.
right, but in the movie, it's rather explicit. The answer is yes.
We could resurrect Fitzgerald, but I feel like that's too much effort.
I'll grab the
If
Ouija
we
board.
do that, we have to channel him through Tom Hiddleston, because Tom Hiddleston
played
him in Midnight in Paris, and
Yeah.
Tom Hiddleston deserves to be temporarily possessed by a ghost for working with Woody Allen after
That's
that.
fair. That's fair.
I just don't acknowledge Midnight in Paris. That movie doesn't exist to me.
On the topic of problematic directors, when are we going to do the episode on Rosemary's Baby?
That's not public domain, is it?
No.
Not yet.
So wait until Rosemary's Baby is public domain, and then you'll get your answer.
Alrighty. Okay, folks, you heard it here first. It's 2037. 2037. We're going to go to the episode on Rosemary's Baby.
We got over a decade to go. We got a decade of this. We're gonna run this podcast for over a decade, baby.
We'll be playing
get
these
your
parts
turn,
till
Ro-
we're old and gray.
You'll
Anyway,
get your turn
Because
eventually, Roman
hustle culture will
Polanski.
still be going then. None of us are ever going to retire, baby. The Supreme Court won't pay our loans. Affirmative action is dead. Gay people can be discriminated against. Fuck America. Fuck it. Fuck it.
And that is why it's
Kill-
Gatsby Month. Add it all
Children,
together.
children.
But okay, any final thoughts on the film before we move on?
Baz Luhrmann, just take a Xanax or something, please.
I want
Can you
Baz
chill?
Luhrmann to drop acid and then direct a movie. If this is what he's like stone cold sober, I want him on acid, baby.
I am here for that. Or shrooms. I'll take shrooms too.
My final thought is, what the fuck was up with Kipsberger?
I can
The
explain
piano-
that.
the
Yes.
pianist.
Well, in the 1970s movie, you get to find out what his deal is. He came to a party at Gatsby's, and then he just stayed.
Hell yeah.
He's like that
Right.
guy in Glass Onion that's every so often you just see him walking along the beach with a beer. He just showed up and
And never
didn't
left.
go away, and Gatsby was like, you know what? He's pretty good.
Fuck it.
He's a pretty good musician. What the hell?
Well, now I want a Glass Onion where they somehow time travel to get to the Jazz Age. I don't care if it doesn't
Oh,
work.
don't give Ryan Johnson ideas.
I will give Ryan Johnson all the ideas after Glass Onion. He has free reign to do anything he wants.
I think it should just be I think it should just be the next one should just be at a costume party.
That'd be fun.
All of it.
Forgo any time travel problems because he's already done a time travel movie, Looper.
Oh, that's true.
Just go costume party.
Yay. I like it. But anyway. go.
I enjoyed the movie, and I thought it was, well, not a perfect or great adaptation. It was a fun adaptation. And given how short the book is, they really made it work for a full-length movie. And it was fun. And sometimes with these hard literary books, you just want a fun time out of it. You just want to shut your brain off, not overanalyze and overthink things.
Even though, arguably, this is definitely a story we should be overanalyzing because, like Sam pointed out, especially in these...
Oh, no,
all the time,
absolutely. But sometimes you just want to enjoy the 1920s for what they were. The surface level, I enjoyed it. I had a good time. Surface level of it all,
let it out
you
some-
know.
I deeply wish that the listeners could see the looks on some of our faces right now.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. You want
19
the fun 20s instead of the real 20s where it's rife with
It's-
racism and all the
it's-
issues.
Okay, now
People-
I'm just thinking about the college humor. No, you weren't born in the wrong
That's
decade.
exactly what it is. Like, no, I wasn't born in the wrong decade. I just want to have the fun of it. Like I know that there were problems. I know that there's always problems, but
Roaring 20s 2 Electric Boogaloo.
See,
That's-
that's what we wanted, but we got all the bad shit instead. Without
People
even
want
cute
us.
flapper dresses.
Tune in 21-23 when we do Gatsby 2, Hunt for Gatsby's Gold.
Gatsby 2 Tokyo Drift.
But no, in all seriousness, like the movie, did its best to make an adaptation that was different and unique, and it really tried to make itself stand out as an adaptation and tried to be something different. And I think we should applaud the attempt at being different, even if not every aspect of it worked.
It was Baz Luhrmann at his Baz Luhrmost.
Yeah.
Yes.
I will say that any director with a style these days is few and far in between. And while I'm not as firm on the stance of the idea where I'd rather exist in a universe where Baz Luhrmann is doing his thing than not live in a universe where Baz Luhrmann isn't doing his thing. If you put a gun to my head and asked me who would make a Great Gatsby adaptation, I think Luhrmann would have been the name that came to my head. So it's one of those movies where I'm glad this thing exists.
Well, I hope you enjoy it because it's probably going to be another 8 years before we get another Baz Luhrmann movie.
And I respect that, you know. But, like, it's also like Wes Anderson also takes an obscenely long amount of time to...
I completely forgot to say it in the beginning, but I can't believe that today is 4 days after Tobey Maguire's birthday.
Right?
And also, fun
He's not
fact,
30.
we're recording this several days before 4th of July, and the book actually starts a few days before 4th of July.
See, the time was perfect.
Canada Day for me.
And again, the whole reason I was initially going to do this as a 4th of July episode is because the American Dream is BS, and what better piece of literature to celebrate then. But then there were a few other things that shall be coming up that have turned this into Gatsby Month.
It's the perfect choice to kind of highlight that the American Dream is long dead and that it's got its problems and flaws.
And with that said, so, I mean, we're kind of already hinting at it, but what does make the Great Gatsby endure? Although, actually, of all of the things we've done on this podcast, it probably has the least retellings and adaptations, simply because it is so new to the public domain.
It is the most readable. Like, as many of you mentioned, of all of the books that are assigned for high school lit classes, it is one of the more readable of the bundle. It has characters who you may not tolerate, but you at least get to some extent. Like, you can there are characters where you can write opinion pieces about them. It has a plot that makes sense and isn't so densely obscured in metaphor that you feel like you're going to claw your eyeballs out. It has memorable lines that you can dissect for meaning. And considering some of the garbage I have had to read in my high school career, the fact that it has a plot at all is a miracle of God. So
it's one that you could actually write a research paper on the meaning of life about, which I actually had to do for one book.
I will say, because it's new to the public domain, I suspect we're going to get a couple more retellings before the decade is out.
Oh, yeah.
Self-made boys movie when?
Please.
Give it a couple years. But I think that it is a book that is readable enough that, like, little 8th grade me with too much chutzpah can at least take a crack at and get something out of it, even if it isn't all of the densely layered themes and what have you, which is, again, rare for high school lit.
I think it's just kind of also come back full circle on that American Dream idea. In the 50s, we had the idea that you could have that white picket fence, 2.5 kids and a dog, and, you know, in a house on a single income. And now we're back to that idea of, oh, the American Dream is dead and gone.
But we're probably not going to live long enough to have another economic boom. Because the planet's on fire.
To quote Ian Danskin about in it from his video about Daria, Gen Xers had the roadmap. They may not have liked it. They could have at least falled back on it. The millennials got handed that roadmap and watched it catch fire in their hands, while the Gen Zers just look at the ashes and laugh. No one is trying to have a future because there is no future to have, you know? That's why we're all so fucking bitter. And
be a fool. Be a beautiful little fool.
Please let me be a beautiful little fool.
Yeah, and so, you know, we've got the Gen Zers who are, you know, bringing back the bimbo culture of just, like, trying to marry rich because, bestie, that's the best we can hope for at this point in the game.
It's about having large dreams and having them crash against the reality of how life will not just give you what you want just because you want it a lot.
That hurt.
And on a personal level, I gotta say that the reason it resonated so much with me was at the time I went and saw this movie, I was in a relationship with somebody and hadn't realized it yet at this point, but I had hit an emotional plateau and I liked them a lot, but it was never going to be more than that. And I could tell that they were feeling emotions that were stronger than just like. And I realized that I had to break it off because otherwise I was just going to be Daisy Buchanan. That I could have stayed in there because it would have been easy, but it wouldn't have been right. So for all its flaws, I love the movie because of the fact that it made me realize something about myself at the time.
And that's the best we could ask of a piece of media of any kind.
Well, I think the best way that I could close it out would be to, and as the moon rose higher and the inessential houses began to melt away until it gradually I became aware of the old island here that flowed once for the Dutch sailor's eyes, a fresh green beast of the New World. Its vanished trees, the trees that made way for Gatsby's house, had once pandered in whispers to the last and greatest of all human dreams. Nard desired, face to face, the last time in history was something commensurate to his capacity for wonder. The novel is many things. It captures the aspirations of many people in their late 20s and early 30s, I guess. It does tell a story that seems to be foundational in terms of people grasping onto things that aren't necessarily important and making that the central point in their life. Jay had incredible ambition, and he used his incredible ambition to focus on one specific thing that he could never have, and when he couldn't have it, his life ended. And additionally, the book is incredibly prescient. It came out in 1925. The consequences of what these people were doing weren't immediately felt until the late 30s. So even as we are experiencing the highs that certain actions can give us, it is a cautionary tale of getting lost within your ambition, being lost within your dream, and reminding you that you can't keep things as they are forever. The line isn't always going to go up forever, and sometimes you just lose.
Definitely. And additionally, I joked about how when you're a teenager, you're not really going to understand all of that. But there are certainly aspects that I got as a 16, 17-year-old. I mean, who knows more about over romanticizing somebody based off of your idea of someone better than a teenager, for one thing? And also, among all of the garbage that this book absolutely reveals, there is something about somebody who holds out hope in spite of all of that. And I do think, obviously we made plenty of jokes about the subtext with Nick, but I do think genuinely what really drew him to Gatsby is, as he said, his ability to hope in the face of odds that were super against him. And you could call it delusional, and you can call it misguided, but at the end of the day, when everything is going wrong, there's a reason. That was the one thing Pandora kept in the box. And hopefully we can be wiser with our hope than Gatsby was. Who's got stuff to plug?
I am the host of 6 Degrees of Star Wars, available wherever pods are cast, and you can also find me on various social media under the label Femme Fictional, including a YouTube channel where I discuss feminist media critiques.
I pop up on Twitter at Dreams Rebel. I am a pinch hit streamer for a couple of TTRPG podcasts that I advertise on there. I am a frequent guest on both 6 Degrees of Star Wars and this podcast. Follow me on Twitter. You will get a lot of information about hockey. Sorry in advance.
Not unlike George Wilson, I have no external projects. I merely devote myself to the daily grind of the 8 to 6:30 and keep grinding. It's that Sigma grind set that the kids today were talking about, right? If you burn yourself down to ash, down into a nub of a man, you will eventually also be able to have your life taken from you and kill Plutarch.
Well played.
LucianMichelson.tumblr.com. It's a lot of Scream, the originals, the Vampire Diaries, and general buffoonery. So come on and follow down the rabbit hole.
And I am an occasional guest on 6 Degrees of Star Wars. I also have a mouthy presence on Twitter as SnakeBitCat, aka Grumpy Old Manchild. And I generally, on 6 Degrees of Star Wars, don't plug anything personal. I try to throw in something relevant to the podcast that I've been on. For this, I'm going to go with something that is topical when we recorded this. Alan Arkin, one of my heroes as an actor, died. I recommend, if anyone hasn't seen him in Catch-22, to watch that. It's a really good movie, and he is amazing.
And you can find me at Faye Riviera on Twitter, Tumblr, and TikTok. You'll also find basically any news about this podcast there. In addition, I would like to give a shout out to Micah Hirsch. He has recently opened an Indiegogo campaign to fund his animated project Sharks, which is a parody of Jaws from the point of view of the sharks. Please donate if you can. Micah's a really great guy, has a real talent for goofy animation, and given that Jaws is about to have its 48th anniversary, I think it's high time we heard from the point of view of the sharks that, unfortunately, were unfairly maligned as a result of this film. Coming up next, we're continuing Great Gatsby Month with an interview with the writer of the once viral script for Muppets Present The Great Gatsby, Benjamin Crew. Hope to see you there, and remember, stories gain power in each retelling.
I remembered how we had all come to Gatsby's and guessed at his corruption, while he stood before us, concealing an incorruptible dream.
It's perfect from your perfect, irresistible imagination.
The moon rose higher, and as I stood there brooding on the old, unknown world, I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he first picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. He had come such a long way, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. But he did not know that it was already behind him.
Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch our arms out further, in one fine morning. And so he beat on, boats against the current, bore back ceaselessly into the past.